My name is Mary Harelkin Bishop, and I am the author of the Moose Jaw Tunnels series, as well as all the books that you see here. I have 11 books published so far. The books I'm most well known for are the Tunnels of Time, of the Tunnels of Moose Jaw or Tunnels of Time series, and so I thought I'd start with them. And today I am going to be reading another part of Tunnels of Time, one of my other favorite parts. So Tunnels of Time and all of the Tunnels books are about Andrea and, in the later books, her brother Tony, who go back in time to the 1920s. And so when they go back in time, as a writer, I have to make sure that I do research so that I can accurately describe what Moose Jaw would have been like in the 1920s. And so I had to do lots of research and look at lots of pictures. And in terms of Tunnels of Time, many people know that the main bad guy in this story is our friend, or should I not say not friend, a famous #1 wanted guy in the 1920s, and that was Al Capone. And so I have to be able to describe him very accurately as well. So I had to read lots of biographies and watch some movies about how he would talk and things like that. And so I'm going to read for you another favorite part of mine from Tunnels of Time. And this part is what Andrea sees when she realizes that she's back in time in the 1920s. So she's standing right now where I'm going to start, in a little caretaker's closet that has mops and brooms and things like that in it, in the train station in Moose Jaw. Andrea carefully turned around, avoiding the mops and buckets, and made her way to the door. She didn't know why she should be quiet, but something told her that being discovered hiding in this tiny room was not a good idea. She opened the door a crack and peered out, looking for an opportunity to join the throng of people unobserved and head up the stairs and into the station. What she noticed was the yellow light of the primitive light bulbs on the walls. They looked elegant, but did they really provide adequate lighting for the stairs, she wondered? Someone should do something about that. She thought about the safety of the people moving on the stairs and wondered why they weren't using the big, bright halogen and fluorescent lights that malls and hotels used for lighting. That would make so much more sense. Why set yourself up for a lawsuit just for the sake of elegance and authenticity? A niggling little thought popped unbidden into Andrea's mind. Maybe this was all the technology they had at the time. Maybe this was the best they could do. Andrea rapidly pushed that thought away. She didn't even want to consider that absurd idea. The dress of the women as they swept past the tiny room caused Andrea to moan and lean heavily against the door. Every woman who passed by was dressed in a prim dress with pleated skirts, huge bows, and large polka dots. When's the last time you saw your mother dressed like that? The dresses were flashy, designed, Andrea thought, to get attention. And they all wore hats and little white gloves. No woman Andrea knew wore hats and gloves like that. When's the last time you saw your mother wearing little white gloves? And the men, almost all of them, wore suits or vests and dress pants. They wore baggy dress slacks and polka dot ties. Where were the jeans and cutoffs and running shoes? Oh, what was going on? Again, Andrea tried unsuccessfully to push horrid and totally freakish thoughts out of her mind. Had she really slipped back in time? Or was this all a horrible, terrible nightmare? Was she actually back in Moose Jaw in the 1920s? And what had Mr. Saunders said about the tunnels? Andrea had to admit she hadn't really been all that interested, and so she hadn't paid much attention. Now she wished she had. Panic grabbed hold of her stomach and shook it. She had to do something. She had to know for absolutely certain what was going on. She burst out of the room, letting the door crash against the wall behind her. Luckily, very few people looked up at her as she sprinted the stairs to the station, 2 and 3 at a time, and pushed the heavy glass and wooden frame door open at the top. It was only a short distance across the marble floor of the train station to the front entrance, but Andrea felt as if she'd run miles. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest as she leaned on the heavy door and half fell, half ran into the night air. Andrea looked up Main Street and stopped short at the sight. Gone were the cars, zooming up and down only a few short minutes before. Gone were the traffic lights blinking red and green to control the flow of vehicles. Gone, too, were many of the buildings she was used to seeing. Instead, Andrea saw a few horses and buggies and cars, the Model T kind she had seen at the Western Development Museum, and ancient-looking streetlights with huge glass globes. She wrapped her arms around her midriff to keep from shaking. What was going on? It must be a joke. It must be a joke. Andrea repeated this over and over in her mind like a chant as she stared unbelieving at the scene before her. She shook her head a few times as if to clear it, but the town remained smaller, older, and almost unrecognizable in her eyes. Andrea felt tears begin to threaten and knew that that wouldn't help her at all. She wasn't a crybaby at the worst of times, and even though this was really bad, she refused to give in to tears. So she'd gone back in time. Other people had done it, like in the movies. But this was real life. What was she going to do? Andrea absolutely rejected the idea that she was stuck in the 1920s forever. There had to be a way back to the present and to her family, and she intended to find it. I really like this part because it really sets up Moose Jaw for when Andrea is running around it. You have an idea what it's like, and you can feel like you're there. The other reason I like it too is because it sets up the whole story. We know that Andrea is going to be dealing with Al Capone. She's going to be a tunnel runner, but ultimately she is trying to find ways to get back to the present. So join me again. We'll talk about more of the books that are sitting here and do some more read alouds.